Hey folks, just like every Saturday, I'm here to talk about an episode of a superhero animated series. Today, I'll be talking about the Season 2 episode of Batman Beyond titled Babel. If you haven't seen the episode, fear not, because I will sum up the plot before I get into the review. And if you don't want to know the plot, then go watch the episode before you watch this video. You have been warned. We open with Terry and Bruce repairing the Batsuit, when Ace attacks Terry and Bruce out of nowhere. Terry takes Ace to the vet, where we see that it's every animal in Gotham City who is acting crazy. Batman makes an appearance at the zoo where he stops an elephant and a gorilla from escaping and killing zookeepers. We soon find out that Shriek, the villain who can control sound and who Batman rendered deaf, is behind the animals going crazy, and this isn't the only trick he has up his sleeve. He turns the chaos up to 11 by taking away verbal communication from the people. Anyone who tries to speak to someone else, their words turn to gibberish. Shriek demands the city turn over Batman, and he will restore everything back to normal. Terry figures out where Shriek is hiding out and takes the fight to him. Shriek gets crushed by a building, but the city is saved thanks to the Powerpuff Girls. Right off the bat, no pun intended, I love the camaraderie that has developed between Bruce and Terry. It doesn't even feel like it's been that long since Terry put on the suit, but already we can see that both of these guys have come a long way since the first episode of this series. Bruce is much more open about sharing his past exploits with his protege, as I highly doubt he would have told Terry anything circa the third episode of this series, and Terry is willing to shut up and listen and take what he's learned and apply it to his own crime-fighting career, as we see in this episode. If you recall how tenacious he was in stealing the Batsuit in the pilot, I feel like this shows that he's also gone through quite a bit of growth. We even get character growth from one of our recurring characters, Barbara Gordon, much later in the episode. When we first see her in the series, she is very much in the mold of Commissioner Yindel from The Dark Knight Returns. She knows that Batman has done some good, but she will not tolerate vigilantes in her city. But by the time we get to this episode, she won't even consider giving Batman up to a guy holding the city for ransom. It's pretty great when you can have such amazing character growth happen over a relatively small amount of episodes like this, and for a minor character no less. Also, like the episode Shriek, this episode plays around with what you can do in a TV series. Admittedly, Shriek was more experimental than this episode, but I still feel like it's trying new things, which is always cool to see. For Shriek, it was removing sound from a portion of the episode and then adding in certain bits of sound while keeping other bits silent. It made for a very eerie episode, and in story, it kept the hero on his toes as he realized just how crucial hearing things is when you're fighting crime. Here, the episode does the same thing with spoken communication. It's not quite like Shriek, where a significant chunk of the episode is missing sound and music. Instead, we get a few smaller chunks of the episode where people can't speak to each other. The episode kinda cheats in that, where Bruce is alone and isn't speaking directly to Terry, and we can hear what he's saying and vice versa. Heck, it even cheats a little more when two people are in the room together and we can hear part of what one person says and then part of what the other says. I guess this is because we're jumping from one POV to the other so we can hear what they intend for us to hear. Personally, I would have gone all the way with this gimmick, and if we have Gordon and one of her officers talking, then we wouldn't be able to understand what either of them are saying at all while Shriek's device is turned on. This would have given the episode even more of that experimental feeling that Shriek did so well in, I think. And also, this particular conversation really didn't add anything to the episode, so I think it would have been interesting to have just tried this, at least for this conversation. Shriek's actions here also result in the stakes being higher than I've ever seen them in this show for a very long time. Batman has an entire city where basic things like telling somebody to look out because a giant piece of construction equipment is going to fall on them cannot be conveyed, and so even more than normal, Batman's got his work cut out for him. Speaking of the stakes being higher, when watching this episode this time around, I thought that surely this was taking a page out of the book of Mark Waid's run on the Justice League comic, when Ra's al Ghul did a very similar thing in blocking the communication across the world, except that he did it with written communication as well, making things even worse. But I was very shocked to see that this episode actually aired about half a year before Waid's Tower of Babel arc began in JLA, and I highly doubt that Waid stole the plot of this episode, since half a year in advance is not nearly enough time for a comic book writer to plan out a storyline of that length, I wouldn't think. As far as the complaints go, I don't have very many for this episode. We see Shriek die in this episode, which some people might think is just desserts since he held the city ransom so that he could get his revenge on Batman. But I'm not one of those people. If you recall, I felt like Shriek losing his hearing was a touch extreme since he was only a hired gun in the first place. Sure, he didn't have to take the job from Powers, but I still felt like it wasn't a fate he deserved. And this whole episode is essentially Shriek wanting revenge on Batman for losing his hearing. Yeah, he goes overboard when he holds the entire city dangling dangling over a fire unless Batman complies. And yeah, there's no real way we would know that he would leave the city alone if he did get Batman. For all we know, he'd then ask for a billion credits after he killed Batman. But still, when Shriek gets crushed by a falling building, the episode seems to act like it's just desserts, and the way I see it, the only reason that he gets crushed by the building is because he doesn't have his hearing, and the only reason he doesn't have his hearing is because of Batman. This, again, seems like way too extreme of a punishment for this guy, but hey, we won't be seeing him again, so I guess I won't have that complaint again for this baddie. My other big complaint is Bruce Wayne himself, specifically after Shriek's demands are known. I get that the whole character arc of this episode is that they don't do this for gratification, as well as showing that Terry is willing to put his life on the line just like Bruce was back when he wore the suit. But I find it extremely difficult to believe that Bruce would ever be in a place emotionally where he would even have to go through this character arc. In a way, this episode is a strange parallel to The Dark Knight Rises. That film kind of skirted playing with how far a hero should go to save the people. Specifically, Catwoman felt that Bruce had done enough for his city, while Bruce disagreed. I won't get into how that movie handled this theme, but the Bruce of this episode is exactly the opposite. He seems to think that if Terry just wants to stay home and not bother because not enough people are thankful that he saved their bacon, then that would be okay. And sure, Terry isn't obligated to put his life on the line, but that isn't the point. With great power comes great responsibility, right? Ultimately, it's not like the entire series has Bruce in this place, so it isn't as fundamental a misunderstanding of the character as it could have been. But it's still very false and unorganic to see Bruce acting this way. That's about all I have on this episode. Despite a few minor problems, this episode is very solid. Probably one of my favorite episodes of Season 2, and maybe even one of my favorite episodes overall from this series. But what did you guys think? Like it? Hate it? Let me know in the comments below. And what did you think of this video? If you liked it, then you're in luck, because next week I'll be doing a similar review over the 2-part Batman the Animated Series episode, Shadow of the Bat. And the week after that, I'll be tackling another episode of Batman Beyond. And if you did like this review, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Meanwhile, I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Also, don't forget, Concrete Pizzazz Groovy Hamwell.